Sure. So start, Ruchi.
Okay. So, okay, sir. Good evening and greetings to all of you. Thank you for joining us, dear faculty members, young researchers from across India. Thank you. I am Ruchi Rana, PhD research scholar from the Department of Modern Indian Languages and Literary Studies, University of Delhi. On behalf of the department, I extend my warm welcome to all of you for joining us today for this special lecture on the second day of the third webinar, national webinar, Multidisciplinary Approaches to Folk Life, Challenges in Perspective. Before we begin the session, I'd like to outline a few instructions for our listeners. Please, I request them to please mute themselves throughout the presentation. And also, if you have any kind of query, remark, questions, you can please write them in the chat box while the presentation is going on, so that we can have the session in a seamless manner without any disturbance. So today we are honored to have with us Professor Purushottama Bilmale sir, and who will be enlightening us today by presenting on the topic of God's design of marriage, a case study of Mailara Linga. And I welcome you, sir. It's pleasure to have you with us. And I'm extremely honored to introduce you to our audience. Sir has served for many years as a professor of Kannada at the Kannada University, Karnataka, and then as a director of the American Institute of Indian Studies, New Delhi. He has also served as professor of Kannada at the Kannada Language Chair, School of Language, Literature and Cultural Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Professor Bilmale is a teacher, writer, columnist, and consultant who helps students and researchers for over 40 years. And he had an extensive experience in the area of Indian literature and folklore. He had published more than 75 articles and 27 books on the topic of Indian literature, folklore, and Indian languages, culture. He has been the recipient of many awards, including Karnataka State Award, Karnataka Folklore Academy Award, and Karnataka Sahitya Academy Award. He was a fellow of Japan Foundation during the year 2009, and also he received fellowship by the Council of American Overseas Research Council in the year 2012 to 2013. Professor Bilmale has visited and lectured so many countries, including USA, Israel, Belgium, Japan. So as you can see, Professor Bilmale's constant involvement and contribution to academia is immense. And if you look at his work, it's so much diverse in terms of his approach to folklore study, especially his research on Yakshagana. Without further delay, I welcome you, sir. We are eagerly waiting to hear you. And the podium is all yours. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Ruchi, for a nice introduction. It's always nice to hear you, because I know how you are working and how you are developing folklore studies in MIL. Thanks to Prakash ji, who is my great friend from many years, and all other colleagues. I can speak Kannada with my MIL colleagues, and Satyanath, I'm missing him now. So anyhow, I've been listening to some of the papers from yesterday, not all, but some papers. They are very good. And after listening some of the papers yesterday, I have changed a little bit of my PowerPoint presentation, because this webinar, I'm not very sure I'm targeting whom, whether it's participants or faculty members, or it's a mixed audience. It's always a, when you talk to students, I know I'm addressing students, and if I'm participating in a seminar, then I know I am addressing scholars. So there is a mixed audience that really creates some confusion. But somehow, mostly my presentation is about discussing multidisciplinary approach, which is the main theme of the seminar. And by taking an example of Mailara Linga, I am going to explain you how this multidisciplinary approach will help understanding a particular, you can say either a epic or a ritual or whatever you want. So because in a ritual, it's all, mixed. There is an epic and there is a ritual, there is a, architecture, there is a sculpture, there is a movement, there is a music. What happened during colonial period, we all separated ourselves from the many knowledge systems, actually. That is the big problem. Now, being a folklorist, I don't read history. Being a folklorist, I don't concentrate much on art history, which is very important to understand a cult like Mailara, because every god, now just like my friend is asking, sir, whether it's a demon or a god, it's a beautiful question. Because when you see a god's image, to understand the meaning or whatever, the function of the image, then we should know something about the art history, actually. Art history, I was working in American Institute with a great scholar like M.A. Daki. He used to show me one, sculpture, and he used to explain me hours and hours and hours about that, which is very new thing to me, being a folklorist. So we separated art history, we separated economics, we separated sociology, we separated literature, we separated folklore. Now, everything we disseminated, and we are taking a small skeleton and trying to explain. This is a high time to cross the borders, So my simple presentation is going to explain you, if you cross the border, what are you going to get? If you don't cross the border, then what are the limitations? So basically, this is to educate ourselves, and especially telling something to my students. I will share a small PowerPoint presentation so that I will not confuse you. It's very clearly stated whatever I wanted to tell you. So you can note down it, and I go very quickly. And at the end of the presentation, I can take some of the questions. Yeah, the title goes like this: God's Design of Marriages, a case study of Mailara Linga, a multidisciplinary approach to God's marriages. Now, as we know, gods are marrying again and again, sometime 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The marriages of gods is very interesting. And each marriage has its own story, and it is reenacted in the ritual. So even the greatest temple like Madurai, Sundaresh is going to marry Meenakshi. And in Hampi, I was in Hampi, and Virupaksha, is going to marry Parvati every year. There are a lot of rituals associated with the god's marriage. Now, to understand God's marriage, what are the things we have to do? I'm taking one example from Mailara Linga, and it's all like bullet point. You are all learned, listeners. I'm really, happy that I could see Professor Patnaik sir sitting here and listening to my paper. So, according to me, the multidisciplinary approach to a problem solving involves drawing appropriately from multiple disciplines to redefine problems outside of normal boundaries and reach solutions based on a new understanding of complex situation. So basically, it's a holistic approach. So we have to cross the border. Then when you cross the border, if you are crossing the border of folklore as a discipline, and if you are crossing the border to sociology, then you are neither a folklorist nor a sociologist. If you are taking folklore into a arena of economics, then you are neither an economic scholar or you are a folklorist. So crossing the border is actually demolishing the borders of a particular discipline. That is the necessity of the day. Basically, it is a holistic approach. Now, holistic is a confusing word. Now, holistic means what? if I take a particular deity like Mailar Linga, shall I keep Mailar Linga in the Karnataka context? Then is it possible to understand Mailara in a Karnataka context? Can we call it as a holistic? Or if we extend to Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, can we call it a holistic? Or can we extend this deity to the whole world? Whole world. So holistic means what? So research paper or our research is not an encyclopedia. That's very clear. Or our research paper is not a dustbin also. Whatever you know, you should not dump on that. And whatever you know, you need not extend to any level. So a research paper is neither encyclopedia nor a dustbin. So holistic approach looks at the whole picture. This is the confusing word. Whole picture means what? The totality of something is much greater than the sum of its component parts, and they cannot be understood by the isolated examination of their parts. I have put a picture. See, this is the sky actually. So holistic means it doesn't mean that you have to capture the whole sky, but you select the part and try to understand it holistically. So first we have to define the area and then look into holistically. So holistically is a defined space, defined time, and in India it's a defined community, and sometimes it's a defined narrator also. So whole is a very restricted word that we should not confuse with that. Now let us directly go to Mailar Linga. Who is Mailar Linga? Now Mailar Linga or Mailara, throughout paper I call him as a Mailara, is a deity worshipped by Gauravas in Karnataka, Maharashtra, and Andhra Pradesh. Gauravas are the devotees of Mailar Linga. At Jejuri, Maharashtra, he is called Khandoba. So Mailara is the Karnataka version of Khandoba, or you can say Khandoba is the Maharashtrian version of Mailar Linga. Now pastoral shepherds are also the main worshippers. So these are the basic things. On this, I am going to build up my paper. Now, annual fairs are held every year to celebrate his victory over Mani and Malla, two demons. This is a very common story of any deity. Now, there are two demons, Mani and Malla. Some people say Mani Malla Asura, in one word. But according to me, there are two deities, Mani and Malla. Now, Mailar Linga kills Mani and Malla. That is the basic story, which goes with any other story in Indian context. So God always has to kill some deities. Now these are the basic structure. Now important festivals are held at Jejuri, same Mailar Linga cult I already told in Maharashtra, in Hadagali, that's a Karnataka, and Meenagundi in Andhra Pradesh. These are the three places I visited and worked. Barriers of modern states will not help us to understand Mailara due to his spread and the movements of devotees crossing political borders. So this is also, the second point is also very important. When we work on folklore, necessarily we have to cross the borders. That's the thing. Now I'll show you the map. Now see, this is the South India. Many of you are aware of that. Now there is a Maharashtra. If you see my cursor, there is a Maharashtra, and there is a Karnataka, and there is a Andhra Pradesh, and there is a Tamil Nadu, and there is a Kerala. So these are political boundaries, and usually our universities are work under it. Now it's very difficult to get permission from the university to go out from your political boundaries, which is really very bad and very wrong in terms of our scholarship development. See, these are the political boundaries. What I'm trying to say is, this is the first approach actually, geographical approach, which usually our folklorists are missing. Not all, very few. Now see, these are the area where Mailar Linga moves. See, the Jejuri is here, and Mailar Linga's devotees, I told you, Gauravas and shepherds, they move from here, they come down, and here is a Mailara. Mailara is also a place in Ballari district of Karnataka. So here is a Jejuri, and from Jejuri, Gauravas and shepherds In fact, in quote, Mailara, during festival, moves from this place to Karnataka, and from Karnataka, he crosses the border and he goes to Meenagundi, and then this is the pastoralist route and goes and back at Jejuri. This is a 1 year circle. This movement, if you start from here, a particular day they start from here, they reach here in February, then they go on, and they come back to Jejuri in 1 year. This is a 1 year pastoralist route. Now that's what I'm trying to say you is, if you want to learn Jejuri or Khandoba or Mailara or Meenagundi, Andhra Pradesh, you should know Marathi, you should know Kannada, and you should know Telugu. So we have to cross the political borders, and we should be able to cross the linguistics borders also. This is a big problem because India has, according to 2011 census, India has 19,565 languages. 19,565 languages, which is very huge. Out of it, only 22 languages have been added in the 8th schedule. And out of 18, 4 languages are from South India and 18 languages are from North India. The only 4 languages, Kannada, Andhra, Tamil Nadu. So it's very difficult for the people to cross the borders to North India. Anyhow, there's another issue. But what I'm trying to say is, we should be able to cross the linguistics border, number 1. We should be able to cross the political borders, number 2. Now, this creates a sacred geography. So a little bit of geography also we should know. So these are the multidisciplinary approach, as Prakash ji suggested me. So where are the disciplines we have to move, and we have to call out the important materials. Thus, we need to know about the cultural boundaries rather than the political boundaries of modern states. Hence, a sense of sacred geography is essential. So this is the sacred geography if we keep Mailara at the center of it. So there are more than 82 Mailara temples here in this route. 82 Mailara. Even in Andhra there are many, and in Karnataka there are many, and in Maharashtra also many. Major is Jejuri and Mailar Linga. This is the Ballari. Major there are 2, but Meenagundi is also very important space, and there are more than 82 temples in the ritual route, or you can call it as a pastoralist route. Now the story of Mailara, as I told you, Mallasura and his brother Manikasura started harassing the rishis. The sages appealed to Lord Shiva. Shiva took a new form of Mailara and led his army with 7 crore Gauravas and 5 Kanchaviras. After 10 days of war, Shiva killed Mani and Malla. Now, interestingly, this story has been created during 16th century. See, there are 2 texts came at 16th century. One is Mallari Mahatmya and another one is Martanda Vijaya. Okay, by learned Brahmin writers to appropriate a local deity with a pan-Indian deity Shiva. It's interesting to make a study of such Sthala Purana. See, most of the Sthala Puranas which associated with the local deities have been created during Bhakti period or post-Bhakti period. In Kannada, it has been created in 15th, 16th century, 17th century, and 18th century. What they do, they take a local deity and they write a story about it. There are more than 700 Sthala Puranas in Kannada. It's available in Kannada, which has only 30 to 40 pages, or 32 pages, 30 pages, sometimes 20. It's a small booklet, which starts from, usually it starts from Shiva. Now Shiva and Parvati sitting, and Parvati says, Shiva, I am a little bit bored. Now tell me some story. Then Shiva says, I don't know the story, but I heard a story which was told by Agastya to some of the rishis, and I heard the story. I will tell you now. So Shiva is not taking the responsibility of the same story. He takes it to further back, and he says that I heard this story from Agastya, or many. I mean, there are hundreds of such stories. So then he says that a Mailara story, and he connects it to himself. So it is interesting to make such how this 16th, 17th century post-Bhakti period has connected local deity into pan-Indian god. This is very interesting. See, in my place, it's called Sulya, it's a small village. We had two bhutas. Uh, uh, nothing to do with the Purana. It's a local deities. And according to the Pardana, that is the epic associated with the deities, says that, they bond in one of the places and travel to Subramanya. They have to fight with the Skanda, Kuke Subramanya, and they defeated him. They settled that. That's the story. But suddenly 1 year back, some 10 years back, a story has been created that these two gods are the incarnation of Rama and Lakshmana. One book came, small book, in my own eyes, I have seen that. Now people believe that two local deities are the incarnation of Rama and Lakshmana. And you know how Rama movement has been changed whole over discourse in India, from 1992, starting with the Lal Krishna Advani's Ratha Yatra. So now it has reached to a place where two local deities have been transformed into Rama and Lakshmana. I have another good example to tell you. There is a deity called Babbaria. Babbaria is an Islamic deity. His father is Sulakalla Murawa Byari. Byari is Vyapari. Vyapari is a Muslim. Sulakalla Amma Fatima. But recently, 2-3 years back, one book came out from Bombay, which is saying that people wrongly depicted Babbaria as a son of Fatima and Sulakalla Murawabyari. It's wrong. He is the incarnation of Babruwahana, he says. Because he's the incarnation of Babruwahana, he takes the name of Babbaria. See, now people believe that Babbaria is the incarnation of Babruwahana. It is not actually. See, Muslim culture cannot worship Babbaria as their god because there is no such worship in Islamic culture. And Hindus, they also cannot worship Babbaria as their god because there is not even one shloka or mantra to praise him. No, you cannot worship Babbaria with the Vedas, Upanishad, or whatever shloka you want to say because it doesn't do with the Islamic deity. But a particular culture has created such deity according to, as per their necessity. But now the discourse has changed. So the Sthala Puranas are changing the stories or whatever legends or epics very speedily in these years. So our, we need to go to know Sthala Purana actually. This is the part of linguistic. Prakash ji knows that. The etymology of the particular place and the meaning and how is associated with the nature of a particular place or a deity of a particular place. Either it's a river or a hill or whatever. Usually it comes from the nature, but now it has been changed. And this is the part of linguistics. So if I remember, if I'm I'm not boring you, it seems. So you take sacred geography where you cross the border. You take the sacred geography where you have to go beyond the language, and you have to take a particular deity for the study. Then you have to go for linguistics. These are different areas we have to poke in. Now the annual festival is called Karanikotsava, and during the festival, the devotees converge to the temple chanting Elukoti, Elukoti. See that Elukoti is Mailara's army to kill Malla and Manikasura. Means 7 crores. Commemorating the 7 crore Gauravas who accompanied Mallara during year. You all know that how epics have been recreated in festivals. By evening, a huge wooden bow, symbolic of that, which Shiva killed Mallasura, is brought and placed in the middle of a vast area called Denkan Maradi. The Gaurava climbs it up, looks around, and then begins trembling as a sign of divine inspiration, and the pilgrims wait for his prophecy. Now Gaurava gazes skywards, pronounces the annual divination, and drops down, and the devotees duly hold him. The prophecy is believed to be divine truth by the devotees. Now, there's one I will show you a small video. It is not much, 2 minutes.
ಇವತ್ತು ಗೊರವಯ್ಯನಿಂದ ಮೈಲಾರಲಿಂಗ
Yes. Now let us go to my main topic. This is the Mailara represented by a Gorava who climbs a big, bow and says something and leaves. This is very important. Please remember, because I am connecting this whole ritual at the end of my presentation. That's the one aspect of the ritual. Now the second aspect. Now Mailara has 3 wives who are women from different communities. This is the now we are talking about communities. Okay, now epics, sacred geography, language, everything is over. Now we are coming to community. Mailara has 3 wives who are women from different communities. Please remember the names. Number 1, Gangi Malawa. This is Gangi Malawa in Mailara, Karnataka. Malasa in Jejuri, Maharashtra. Different names, but his first wife, or he is from a Lingayat merchant, Vani community. In some narrations, she is a daughter of Tirupati Timmappa or Timma Shetty. Mailara promises a big money but never gives. That is the big epic. Now, how Mailara marries to Gangi Malawa, but the underlining point is she is a rich woman. That's it, rich woman. Lingayat merchants are very rich. And in some narrations, she is a daughter of Tirupati Timmappa, and Tirupati Timmappa known for money. And this man goes there and says that I want to marry your daughter. Then Tirupati Timmappa says, no, I can't give my daughter, to a beggar like this. He said, no, I'm not a beggar, I'm a rich man. What do you want? He said, 7 crore rupees I want. Then Mailara says, okay, I will give you, but get your daughter first. He marries and he come back, then he never returns the money. He cheats Timmappa. That's what, according to one narration during the ritual, people says 7 crores. But the basic underlying point is, or things to be remembered is, Gangi Malawa or Malasa is a rich woman married by Mailara. The question later comes, why a god needs, at least, or Mailara needs a rich woman like Gangi Malawa? That's question number 1. Number 2, Kuruba Tewa. Kuruba is a community, shepherd community, Kuruba. Gunther Sontaimir worked out wonderfully on that. Kurubattawa, Awa is Amma. Kurubatti is women, of Kuruba community. And she's called Banai in Maharashtra. So Malasa and Banai. In Karnataka, Gangi Malawa and Kurubattawa. Kurubattawa is from Dhanagar, shepherd community. The Mailara meets her during hunting. She is erotic, resolute, but does not even know how to cook. This is the second wife, Kurubattawa. The same question we have to ask, why Mailara needs Kurubattawa, a woman from shepherd community, he meets her during hunting, and it's a beautiful story, you know, erotic story. A third woman he married is Komali. Komali is an untouchable woman, daughter of Malla. See, if you remember, when I started this presentation, I told the story that Mailara kills Malla, Mani Malla. So this Komali is the daughter of Malla. So Komali is also a wife of Mailara. So it's very interesting to see that then it means Mailara killed his father-in-law, or after killing Malla, did he marry Komali? Who is Komali then? So Komali is an untouchable woman. If you see the community levels, the Gangi Malava is a Lingayat, Vanika, rich community. Either you take it as a Lingayat community or a daughter of Timmappa, it gives the same meaning. Second is Kurubatewa, a Dhanagar community. Mailara meets her during hunting and marries. Then Komali, an untouchable woman, daughter of Malla, initially refuses to marry Mallara, but through many tricks, Mailara abducts her at midnight. This is a very beautiful story. He goes and he stays at her house and he creates a lot of problem. I mean, it's a wonderful story, Komali and Mailara. So these are the three wives. Please remember Gangi Malava, Kurubatewa, and Komali. Now, this also, you know, many of you know, we all know that myths, legends, and rituals are interconnected. During annual festival, Mailara visits two places where his two wives lives. So there are three wives actually. The first wife, Malasa, always lives with Mailara in the temple, in the main temple. If you go to see Mailara or Khandoba, you will also see Malasa nearby. Either she shares seat with him or she has another seat very near to Khandoba or Mailara. So so in the ritual, he will not go and see Malasa because she stays with him only. But when he come out, after this Karanikosava that I told you, you know, he leaves a big bow and, you know, come down, then he he takes a horse actually. After 1 or 2 hours, by evening, he takes a horse and then he goes to a particular place where Kurubatewa stays. So Kurubatewa's temple is not within the complex of main Mailara temple. See, that's interesting. Now we are moving towards temple architecture. See, this is what I wanted to say you. I am not giving any interpretation. Instead, I want to take you to different area where we have to work. Now, when I say Mailara is coming out from temple premises, he meets Kurubatewa or Banai in the Jejuri, and then it's almost 500 meters away from main temple, Kurubatewa. And then he meets Komali. Komali is almost 2 kilometers away from main temple. So now see the placement. Number 1, Malasa, the first wife, the rich woman, daughter of Timmasheti or a Lingayat Vanika, stays with Mailara inside the temple. Now, after the Karanikosava, Mailara travels in a horse to meet Kurubatewa. She is almost 500, 600 meters away from the main temple, and there are some rituals, and he comes back. Then he goes to a riverside in Karnataka. Mailara, it's a Tungabhadra river, riverside, and there is a round-shaped stone is there, and people say that she is Komali, and he goes and he meets Komali and makes some puja, and then comes back. So he meets. See, these are the placements of different goddesses inside the temple. This is very interesting. Now, what I'm trying to say is, now we need to know the temple architecture. Now, why this placement and what type of the gods they have created. I will show you some of the photos of Kurubatewa and Malasa. and Komali. Komali, I mean, there is no image for that. This constitutes a ritual route which is considered as very sacred. This is a ritual route now. Now from the main temple to Kurubatewa, coming back, and then moves to Tungabhadra river to see Komali. This is a ritual route. This ritual route is entirely different from the sacred route which I showed you earlier. Now this is the Khandoba of Jejuri. Now to understand Khandoba, now Khandoba always has a huge mustache and open eye. Now A.K. Ramanujan has talked lots about open eyes and a big breast. He has his own interpretation. Now if you see here, this is the, I mean, the image of Mailara everywhere. Now you can see here, if I see my cursor, this is the Malasa or Gangi Malava. So Gangi Malava always, near to him. And this is the Karnataka, which I worked long back. I asked some of my friend to illustrate it. You can see that how the architecture, sculpture of Mailara Linga. Now, why this? You see the huge mustache? It is also here. It is also here, and all senses. To understand this, we need to know art history, a different type of sculptural representation of our gods. Why Ganga is on some animals? Why Yamuna is always travels with the Ganga always travels with the kurma, tortoise, and or makara, crocodile. All such things are there. So, and now sculptural representation that the sculptural representation of Mailara, an important factor. Mustache, headgear, instruments in hand, body, etc. are to be examined by an art historian. We cannot say that I have seen a god and I explain. To interpret, we need to cross the border and move into art history. Now this is the temple. Now this is the main temple at Mailara, and Karanikosava happens on the right side of the temple here, and then after the Karanikosava he moves towards Kurubatewa. Now this is very important. You just remember, I think I have brought this slide a little bit early. Now after the Karanikosava, after the Gorava says something, on the top of the bow, if the people, there are more than 6-7 lakh people gathering there, and they built a small, this type of the structures. This type of the structures as a part of the whole ritual. You can see this here, one, and easy. It's a very temporal. It's a very temporary, and sometimes it's with the ice candy, or sometimes they bring small sticks. They just erect a small mantapas there after the Karanikosava. Now, as I interpreted later, according to me, this is the symbol of settlements. Symbol of settlements. The pastoralist god or pastoralist hero Mailara, after defeating Malla and after marrying Komali, he stayed in a place called Mailara on the bank of Tungabhadra. So this construction of this small mantapas, temporary mantapas, according to me, is a symbol of settlement. Let us see it a little bit further. Now, placement of wives, I think I already explained you. These 3 wives have been provided different spaces in Mailara's divine complex. Now, Malasa or Gangi Malava always share seat with the Mailara. Kurubatewa has a separate temple, which is approximately 500 meters away from Mailara's seat. Komali does not have any temple, but a temporary space will be created during annual festival, which is almost 2 kilometers away from Mailara's seat. Now see some of the photos. Now Mailara and Malasa, Malasa always with him. See, this is Mailara killing Mani and Malla, Mani and Mallasura, and Malasa is with them. Now another photo, Mani and Malla, and Mailara is killing. This is a modern painting, but even if you go to temple structure, then you could see Mailara is sitting with his wife Malasa. And you see here, this is the Mailara, it is like It's somewhere in Bidar, I think. It's in Bidar, Karnataka, and you see his wife is here. And okay, of course, is there another photo? Now, Kurubatewa, the second wife, I already told you, Kurubatewa do not share seat with Mailara. She has an independent small temple near the main temple. During annual festival, Mailara goes on horse to this temple and meets Kurubatewa. Sorry for repeating. So this is the architect, what you would say, symbol of Kurubatewa. Kurubatewa, there are two legs representing Kurubatewa, and there are some linga type of the structures. See the difference now. Now Malasa has a beautiful temple, a beautiful sculpture, a beautiful placement, but his second wife belonged to Danagar community, doesn't have a place inside the temple, but outside doesn't have a proper temple also. I mean, this is the second level of construction. And I cannot say anything about Komali because it doesn't have anything there. It's completely zero. At least Komali has this much. Why Komali doesn't have anything? Is it because she belonged to untouchable community? Or I don't know. I'm not going into analysis, but I'm trying to pull you to different aspect of a ritual, so that we can learn more about a particular ritual. Now, Komali, an untouchable woman. Komali never had any temple. A riverside stone temporarily represents her during ritual. Mailara visits her during festival by walk. See, to Kurubatewa, he goes on horse. But for Komali, he just walks. Now, let us ask following questions. Who is Mailara? Number one. Why Mailara has 3 wives? Why they are placed as explained? Why Mailara has wife from different strata of the society? So, I think I can conclude here, but still I have few slides. See, to understand this, we need to have a multidisciplinary approach to this deity. Now, if you asking about wives, this is sociology, right? This is sociology, sociology of marriage. Then the placement, the second question, placement is an architectural representation. You need to understand architecture. Now, why Mailara has wives from different strata of the society? It's a sociology and economics also that I'm going to tell you in the next slide. Now, sociology of marriages. All these marriages suggest the conflicts, acceptance, and reappropriation of 3 economic conditions at some point of history. It may be suggested here that Mailara's marriage with the 3 wives who are women from different communities serve as an economic and cultural links between the god and the community. Now, what is the economy of the marriages? Mailara's first wife, Malasa or Gangi Malawa, is from the Lingayat merchant community, a rich class. See, this is the class. His second wife, Kurubatewa or Banai, is a Dhanagar or Kuruba girl, shepherd caste, belongs to a pastoral economy of Deccan Plateau. Deccan, known for pastoral economy, which Sonthaimer has studied immensely, and many other scholars also, because that place doesn't get huge rain, and it get only small bushes. So that's the perfect place for a pastoralist community who travels with either with the cow, or most of the time they travels with the shepherds. The Komali is an untouchable woman, basically belonged to a community which was involved in shifting cultivation. So untouchable community, in Kannada they say Kumeri Bele, shifting cultivation. They don't have a concept of private property. Dalits, even now, hardly they have any concept of the private property. They stay near a small hill, they cut the hill, they grow something, either ragi or rice sometime. They grow one crop, they cut it, and then they move it to another place. So there is no private property concept in the untouchability. It means there are 3 strata of the society. This is the economics of the society. The rich community, the pastoral community, and untouchable community where one doesn't have private property. Now, as Gunther Sonthaimer pointed out, Mailara, Khandoba was primarily a god of herdsmen, and that the cult of him is at least older than 12th century, maybe a product of Vedic Rudra, who like Mailara was associated with the robbers, horses and dogs. Maybe, we don't know. The cult possibly was spread by Lingayat, Jain and other merchants associated with the Mailara Khandoba cult to other parts of the Deccan. Besides, Mailara is also identified with the deities of Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh and is called Mallanna. In Andhra is called Mallanna, Mailara in Karnataka, and even Mallu Khan in Bidar, now which was ruled by Bahmani Sultanas for 300 years. So there he called Mallu Khan, and other traditions like Shakta cults of folk goddesses were assimilated into Mailara cult, identifying the goddesses of Mailara wives, Gangi Malava and Kurbateva. So we need to know the history of Deccan. Now, I will wind up now. Mailara is always associated with a horse and a dog, which simply identify him with the pastoralism. Now, even in the rituals, if you go to Mailara Jatra or Khandoba Jatra, you will see a lot of dogs and horses there. The pastoralism is a form of animal husbandry where domesticated animals known as livestock are released into large vegetated outdoor ranch pastures for grazing, historically by nomadic people who moved around with their herds. The species involved, I mean, at least in the Mailara cult, is cattle, goats, and sheep. Now you can see this photo from near Mailara. This is a pastoralist woman, and there's a horse, and there's a dog. See here. The same thing you see in the ritual in a different format. And there must be a lot of sheep here. You can't see that. Sometimes these are the things. So see this. Now, Mailara's marriage with the Komali suggests his conflict with the compromise with an untouchable community involved in shifting cultivation. These conflicts ended with the settlements of pastoral communities on the banks of river Tungabhadra. If you remember that a small photo which I showed you earlier, after the Karanika, people just sit there and build small houses. You go and ask them, what is this? They say house, mane. They say mane, idu namma mane, house. So after the Karanika is the victory of a pastoralist hero, Mailara, over Malla, who is doing shifting cultivation in a place called Hadagali or Mailara. Okay. Now, if you go to ritual, lot of Dalits, untouchables, sit on the place where they believe that Malla lived. So they are all, telling lot of songs about Malla. That is the one thing. So there is a conflict between pastoralist and Malla. Malla represents an untouchable community. Komali is his daughter, which shows a conflict. I don't want to, detail it because you can understand now. This conflicts ended with the settlements of pastoral communities on the banks of river Tungabhadra. His marriage with the Kurbatava suggests the settlement with the other pastoral communities ended with the expansion of land ownership. So once they settled, then they have to fight each other to develop the land or to extend their land. So the marriage with the Kurbatava, according, because he goes with the horse, then according to the epics, there are a lot of fight between Kurbatava and then finally he marries. So there is always a fight, then a marriage. A fight and a marriage. The fight is a conflict, marriage is the compromise or agreement. His marriage with the Gangi Malava suggests his settlement. I'm sorry, I wrongly mentioned here. His marriage with the Komali suggests his settlement in the economically, Gangi Malava is forwarded communities. These developments must have happened at the various stages of the history. So the first Komali, a untouchable women without land ownership. Marriage with the Kurbatava, yes. After the settlement, land extension. Once you extend the land, then you grow a lot of things. Economy grows up. Then the third marriage, Gangi Malava's marriage with him, suggests his compromise with the economically forwarded communities like Shettis. So these developments must have happened at the various stages of the history. Broadly, I can say Mailara's marriage with the Komali was the first stage. Maila's marriage with the Kurbateva may be second stage of the economy, and third marriage Gangimalava may be the third stage of the economic development. There is no private property here. There is an extension of the property here, and there is a collection of lot of money or richness. Thus, a holistic approach. Now, if I say one word, you have seen crossing the borders, crossing the languages, seeing sculptures, seeing rituals, trying to understand epics and temple architecture and movements, economy and sociology of marriage. So these all things, if you take into consider, I think we can say something new about this God. Thus, a holistic approach tries to look at the whole picture. The totality of something is much greater than the sum of its components. If I am a folklorist, if I ask my students to go and see Mailara Jatra, he goes and he collects the epics and he comes back. He never sees even ritual also. So that is the problem. Now we have to cross the border, to stay there for a week and try to understand the whole situation. Component parts of they cannot understood by the isolated examination of their parts. I think I'll stop you. Thanks very much for your patience. I know you must be having a lot of questions, but I tried my level best to explain how crossing the border will help you to understand a particular ritual. So our students, should not sit in the folklore classes. Let them listen to folkloric, then they let them move out to economy, sociology, architecture, geography, so many things. Thank you very much. Thank you, Prakashji, for providing me this opportunity. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, sir. It was really amazing to hear you. During from the beginning itself till the end, you answered a lot of questions and problems and challenges I personally feel being a researcher within folklore discipline. And it was really great to hear from you the importance of crossing boundaries as a folklore researcher, and the complexities that are involved being a folklore researcher. Like, it's inherent, being multidisciplinary and always curious to learn about not just folklore, but what other disciplines and areas of studies can offer to understand different genres of folklore in their entirety, as you mentioned, with your holistic approach. And also, I think with your particular case study of Mailaralinga cult, there are so many things I'd like to mention, but I think we have questions also for you. Yeah. So I would like to take questions now. So we have one question from Abdur Rahman. The question is, could you explain about the history of Babariya again?
It is out of this topic, but briefly I will tell you. Babariya is a local deity, very popular near Udupi. You must have heard. Udupi is a small area, 400 kilometers down to Goa. Okay, Babariya is a goddess whose father is Sulakalla Muravabyari and mother is Fatima. His work is to travel in the sea and collect fishes, and sometimes travels to other places to sell the goods. But one day he met with an accident and he dies. So he met with an accident and lost everything. But holding a plate, he travels to another side of the world, where he prays his God. The Pardana never says the God appeared. God appeared and he asked him, sir, please save me. Then he says, you born and brought up in a place called Udupi. You need not stay here. You have to go back. Okay, you have to go back. You have to go back there. Then he comes back. On the way, then he meets some Jains and others. Then finally he dies. After his death, he has become a deity worshipped by the people who goes to sea every day to catch the fishes. So he's a god. Okay. Now that is a simple story, and people yearly goes and worships Babbarya without any problem of Hindus, Muslims, nothing. There is no fishermen go there, Dalits go there, everybody goes there. Those who have something to do with the sea go there and worship him. This is the now, because of the recent development, this Hindu-Muslim development, how a political leadership approve worshipping a Muslim deity by Hindus. It's a big problem. So that's why a new narration has come up. Reason I will show you. If you you can note down my number 9811733378 is my number. Ruchi can give you 9811733378. If you send me your query, then I will send you the name and the page of the book. I have, even I can send you a xerox of them. He says that this is wrongly mentioned. I have a Pardana collected in 1884, which says this story. But the recent story says that Babbarya is incarnation of Babruana. Not so, people wrongly mentioned. Now this I don't know how to press it, but this right-wing activist through WhatsApps, through Facebooks, and many other things, they said that Babbarya is not a Muslim, is an incarnation of Babruana. Now suddenly discourse have changed, and majority of the people believes that. They don't believe my collection, which I have done in 1984, where he is a Muslim deity worshipped by Hindus and Muslims. He is neither a Muslim nor a Hindu now. That's what I'm trying to say you, because he protects people who goes to sea. That's his function. But now people are converted him into a Hindu deity. So where is the incarnation for Babruana? I never heard actually. Of course, Vishnu has an incarnation, Rama has an incarnation, but Babruana is a son of Arjuna, doesn't have any incarnation. But suddenly this incarnation came, and now people are worshipping him. Now, next few years, this Muslim identification will be demolished, completely demolished. And now the new version is coming. So this is how Sthala Puranas, that's what I'm trying to say. These Sthala Puranas have been changed every time according to the ruling class ideology, and they have changed the narration from time to time. So we cannot stop our researches with the Sthala Puranas. We have to go much beyond that. That's what I'm trying to say. This Jajuri Mahatme or Martanda Vijaya, written by Marathi scholar, connected Mailara is a pastor's deity to Shiva, or sometimes some Martanda, many other stories are now people are believing. So in the public discourse, if somebody says like this, then people are believing that. So Babbarya is very, I have a paper on that, an epic hero from coastal Karnataka. And if you send me your query, I can send the paper to you without. I have a ready-made paper, and I have a beautiful video also, where Muslims are coming and saying Allahu Akbar, Allahu, all such things are there. It's a purely Islamic Hindu, like Indo-Sarsanic style, Indo-Islamic style. That's like, I mean, it's a beautiful, I like that. That's the beauty of India. That's the beauty of India. Even Muslims cannot claim him as a Muslim because he's a deity. Even Hindus cannot say that he is a Hindu deity because you don't have any slokas to worship him. No priest can go and worship him. But it's happening in a particular place called Udupi. That's beauty of India. That's the beauty of India.
Yeah, thank you for your answer, sir. We have Patnaik sir is appreciating your presentation. He's saying that the presentation rightly justified the main theme of the webinar, and we are very grateful to have you with us. He's also asking what should be the proper methodology, whether to enter from other disciplines to folklore or from folklore to other disciplines.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. If you are a folklorist, you have to keep folklore at the center. If you are a literary critic, then you have to keep literature on the top. See, that's how discipline grows. Now, as a folklorist, I can go and collect Mailara epics, something to do with the Gangimalava, the second epics with the Kurubatewa, the third epics with the Mailara. Only folklorists can do that. The sociologist will not go there. Economist will not grow there. So to understand that, to illustrate that, then I have to cross the border. If I am a historian, then I will understand the history of Deccan actually. History of the Deccan, where you get less rain, a lot of bushes, then the ships go around, passengers go around. I study the history as a historian, medieval history, then I cross the border, then I go to folklore, then I try to understand Mailara cult there. So your discipline must be at the center. You don't compromise with that. But when you cross the border, you are not just a folklorist. You are becoming yourself something else also. That flexibility is there. The problem is of our guides in the university. If you say this as your proposal, they say, नहीं, ये क्या है? ये तो sociology हो गया. आप क्यों वहाँ जा रहे हैं? If you say this is economy, no, ये तो economics है. ये क्यों जा रहे हैं? And in Karnataka, at least, they won't approve your proposal also. That's the problem of the departments. If I say something, sir, I want to do art history, what is that? Art history of Mailar Linga. They say, ये क्यों कर रहे हैं आप? आप तो literature student है. Art history तो अलग है. So don't go there. No. These are the problems of guides and students. But slowly we have to, at least after getting your PhD, we should be able to get out from these boundaries. Yeah.
Thank you for your wonderful answer, sir. I have I've been struggling with this question that Patnaik sir mentioned for so long, being a folklorist. And I believe that only a grounded researcher and a scholar like you can answer this with so simple words and clarity of thought. So our next question is by Mahesh Kumar Dey, sir. He's asking, how do general people deal with this Mailara Linga cult? And can we say it is an illustration of popular culture?
Yeah, sure. It's a popular culture, and people from all strata of the society go there and see. But basically, the how if I say a ritual depth, if I use the word, it's a ritual depth. In the ritual depth, the performers are shepherds. Performers are shepherds. A shepherd can become a Gorava, or he represents Mailara. Okay, so that is it. And Mailara Linga always worshipped by a shepherds. So the depth of the ritual is completely controlled by shepherds. So that's why Gunther Sontheimer has done a wonderful study on this and published a very beautiful book on this. He says that it's a pastoral deity. He strongly established, I completely agree with him. But once you establish, and if you found out a ritual depth is controlled by a particular community, then it can extend it in many ways. See, now Dalits comes there because Mailara Linga's one wife is a Dalit woman. And they come and stay in a place called Deccan Maradi, where people believe that Malla was lived and died. So untouchables goes there. They stay there. They tell the story of Malla, not the story of Mailara Linga. So in the connected, and of course Vanikas, Linga has come there a lot of Karnataka, Uttar Karnataka, where Ballari is full of Lingayat community. You know that after 12th century it has been converted into Lingayat Virshaiva community. The Virshaiva communities are coming because they want to see Malasa, because it's their daughter. The Mailara married Malasa or Gangi Malawa. She's this one. Now shepherds, Dalits, and Lingayat communities closely associated with the Mailara and ritual. They have to come because it is there. Then other things like me and many other people can just go and enjoy, go and see. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
But basically now you can call it as a popular culture. As if you remember that video, you could see 7 lakh people gathering there. And interestingly, the Gorava goes up the bow and he says Saddele. Saddele means silent. Saddele, silent. That's the one word makes 7 lakh people silent. Really amazing. There are a lot of noises in the festival hall. But when the Goravappa goes, a lot of people these days are now holding mic so that whatever he says, you can listen to all over. If he says Saddele, then complete silence. The 7 lakh people, converting themselves into a complete silence. It's a great experience to, you have to just go and see that. Then he says something oracle, then he comes down. Now the oracle is also very interesting. He says, for example, Maguvina talamele gidi kuntale parak. A parrot is sitting on child's head, he says. The parrot is sitting on child's head. What does it mean? Then you have to ask people, sir, what did he say? At least in my experience, nobody says that Maguvina talamele gidi kuntale. He said that a parrot sitting on child's head. Nobody says. Somebody says, oh, this year there's no rain. And somebody else says, oh, this year is no good for politicians. It means the one saying has been recreated in many times, right? The multiple tellings is what? So multiple people are telling according to their needs and, like that. Oh, no, this time children will have some problem. Now woman will get some problem, like that. So these are the very interesting things.
Yes, sir. So Mahesh Kumar Dey sir is asking, would you explain further about 1 year route from Jejuri to Karnataka to Andhra Pradesh and back to Jejuri?
Yes, sir. This pastoralists, this is very common to pastors anywhere in the world. But according to my study, now Jejuri is a place in Maharashtra, you know that. There are 2 types of these shepherds, pastoralists actually. One semi-agrarian and one is full pastoralists. Semi-agrarians, now what happened? They collect rainwater because they would, where there is no rain, and if you get a little rain, the technology is developed by the tribes of a particular area, they should able to collect some rain. Now, when they collect the rain, they can have a small house nearby and they can have a small land nearby. And the aged parents, women, children can stay there. And others, the young boys, they travel with the hundreds of sheep. Sometimes it's 500, sometimes it's 700. Huge, there is a 4 or 5 people or a complete family, 7, 8 shepherds with the 500, 600 sheep. They go. They will have 500 to 600 sheep. They will have 4 or 5 horses with them and a dog, because dog has to be surround these sheep to protect sheep from other animals. That's it. The cheetah can come and other animals can come and eat during night time when they sleep. So dogs to protect sheep. And if you go to Mailara, you see horses. People are behaving like horses. People are behaving like dogs. All things that. So it's a ritual recreation of the actual pastoralism. Now from Jejuri, they start towards south actually. They cross the border at Belagav, then go to Mailara. And Mailara ritual happening in the February, in the full moon day of the February. So they reach there and there's a huge festival. And then after that, they goes towards east and they reach Andhra Pradesh. Then they go to north. Then in some places, they take left and they come back to Jejuri. This is 1 year route where 500 to 600 shepherds move with the, on the way, they can sell sheep, they can eat sheep, they can do a lot of things. Actually, this is the prime, nowadays they have bank accounts everywhere actually. They cannot carry, they can sell some 10, 15 sheep to somebody and they earn some 4,000 or 5,000 rupees. They cannot keep money and they cannot sleep on the road or at least in the public places. So they have banks all over. That is the latest story. But basically, this is the ritual route. If you remember in my slide, if you do the rituals, this is a 1 year movement, exactly 1 year movement. Then in Jejuri, after the Jejuri festival, they stay there for 2-3 months. Then after getting a little bit rain in November, by this month, they travel to south. And Mailara, they reach by February. And February to Meenagundi, they reach by March, one month. And then go to, this is actually, sheep gazing route. Because it's a less raining place, you get a lot of bushes, which is perfect for pastoralists. They don't travel in a huge forest. See, for example, I am coming from Western Ghats, huge forest, no pastoralists there. But I was in Hampi and even Haryana, I was in American Institute. I saw shepherds are coming. These are the beautiful, places where shepherds used to move. I saw in American Institute of Indian Studies, shepherds are coming. But now there is a huge developments, big building, Medanta, others. Now shepherds have no space to walk. I think they have stopped. So 1 year route is 1 year pastoralist route. That's it. It's exactly 1 year. Yeah.
So, sir, our next question is from Vijay Shri Kashyap. Can you please speak on how the cult of Mailara Linga is appropriated with the caste politics of Karnataka?
It's a huge question. I just hinted at. I think a lot of work has to be done on that. Simply, I mean, to make it very simple, number one, this pastoralist community has settled in the place called Mailara and in other places. That happened in the medieval history, actually, during Bhakti movement or so. So according to the inscriptions and other, it happens in 12th century, not before that. Before that, they are the pastoralists. But 12th century, economic social change that even Sharana, Basava, others brought, they made, people to settle in a particular place. And Kumarama in the 16th century has created a lot of artificial reservoirs, collected the rainwater in Ballari district, and he made people semi-pastoralists, or you can call it as a semi-agrarian pastoralists. So that is there. So in one way, this Kurubas, the pastoralist Kurubas, has to replace untouchables to settle. So the settlement always replaces somebody else. Even in my research area is that actually some community people have traveled from Hasana to Dakshina Kannada district, and they have replaced Malekudiyas. So Malekudiyas were there. So migration and settlement always replaces somebody. Now the replacement was done to untouchables. But somehow there is a clash as Mailara, Malla, and a war between Malla, Mailara, and Gorava. It's a huge clash. And then later they compromise a little bit. The marriage shows the compromisation. But this is a very weak compromisation because Komali doesn't have a sculpture, doesn't have a temple. She's not to be seen anywhere, only in the ritual. And some people never goes there also. But as I am a researcher, I went with the Gorava, can I come with you? So, oh, please come, he said. Then he went to Tungabhadra river and he walked there and stopped there and started. So anyhow, that's the ritual part. But the pastoralist settlement replaces untouchables or Dalits represented by Malla and Mani, defeated by Gorava, and the marriage with the Komali says the agreement. That's the number one. Number two, once settled there, then you need extension. No, you cannot have a small pot and leave. Then the extension. This extension happens in two things actually, in folklore and even in Yakshagana also. The extension always starts with the hunting actually. So hunting, there is a hunting. You go to hunting, and most of the folk stories, there is a clashes because of the hunting. You throw one arrow to a pig, and the pig, dies neither in his place nor in their place. So then you have to fight with other people. So the hunting is actually symbolizes the extension. And marrying with the Kurubattava, and if you see it's a very beautiful epic, Kurubattava epic. Personally, I like that because she refuses him and a lot of things. Somehow the extension, once you settle, then there is an extension of land. When you extension of the land, you need to have a hunting, all such things. And then marriage with the Kurubattava says that the land extension and settlement. The third one is, I think it happens recently, maybe 17th, 18th century. The marry Timma Shetty's daughter or a Lingayata Vanika's daughter. This is a pastoralist community's adjustment with the rich family. And now even Malasa has a rich place in temple architecture. So these three economic, levels existed in Karnataka from 12th century to at least 17th century, which is represented by Mailara cult. So through Mailara, the divinity, everything is fine. But through this marriage, you can see the economic transformation and economic agreement with the different community. That's what I can broadly say. And I have a paper on that. And please note down by number 98117-33378. If you send me a message, then I can send my paper. It's a big paper actually, something around 30 pages. Yeah.
Also, sir, as you can see, the chat box is filled with words of appreciation.
Oh, appreciation. That's fine.
For you.
No scolding.
And especially, I'd like to mention Professor B.N. Patnaik, sir, is appreciating your presentation. He's saying that it was a great talk by you, and thanks a lot. So, sir, our next question is by Mitali Burman, ma'am. She's asking if there are any folk songs related to Mailara Linga.
Yes. Lot of, it has been collected by one Professor M.B. Neginahala, who was an anthropology professor at Karnataka University. And recently one Dr. Manjunath Bevinkatti has collected the Mailara Linga songs. There's a lot of Mailara Linga songs available in Kannada language. It has been collected by folklorists, published by folklorists. And I'm sorry, I don't see any translations in English. I think we can do that once Ritu finishes her PhD, then we can sit and we can translate these to English and many other languages. So there are huge epics. The marriage with the Malasa, Gangi Malawa is a huge epic. Marriage with the Kurbatava, it's very beautifully narrated. A personal, I like that. But Komali Sandhu, it's called Komali Sandhu or Komali Sandhi. It's very short. So very short. So these three epics are available with a lot of variations. Yeah, it's available in Kannada language.
Also, sir, I saw some popular folk songs on video on YouTube related to the Mailara Linga cult. So earlier I was not very much familiar with the whole folklore related to the cult, but that will be a very interesting area to look into. Our next question is by Santosh Narayan Rao. He's asking, is there any significant saying of Gaurava in the present day?
Pardon me? Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, he's asking, is there any significant saying of Gaurava in the present day?
Ah, yes. Gauravas are there. Still they are wanderers. They go to house and they sing the songs of Mailara and they collect money and goes. So their main activities happens in and around Mailara temple, either in Jajuri or Meenagundi or in Mailara. But in other days, they travel all over and they sing Mailara songs and they collect money. When I was in Hampi, they used to come to my house and I used to pay them 10 rupees, 20 rupees, 30 rupees, whatever. So they are there. Gauravas are there. And Gaurava songs have been collected from one senior folklorist in Karnataka, and it has been published. Gauravas are there. If you go to Ballari district, you can see everywhere. Yeah. If you go to Hampi, you see there. Hampi is a historical place, and you can see a lot of Gauravas there wandering. I have photos, but I know that it will take a lot of time. If you remember the man who is climbing bow, that is
right in the video.
Exactly with the long hair, with the colorful dress, with the lehenga type of shirt, all such things. They are there, still there, very much there.
Okay, sir, our next question is by Preeti Kalra. She's a PhD student from our department, working under Patnaik sir, and she's asking, what are the performative elements in Mailara Linga ritual which establish collective consciousness amongst community?
Oh, yeah, we have to, we need to look at this. See, now how, according to me, or for the timing, I can say that how people are associating themselves with the ritual is the basic question. How and where they connect themselves. See, how, see, some of the communities are connecting with the Komali and Manimala. Some of the communities are connecting themselves with the Mailara. Now, if you go and see the huge crowd there, these two groups, either here and there, in different places. But as Mailara kills Mani and marries Komali, both come together, right? First they are separated in terms of place, space, in terms of epics, they separated. Then after the ritual, where Mailara kills Mani and comes back with this head, then he marries Komali, then the two groups come together, that creates a public consciousness, a common consciousness, right? Common consciousness. So as Mailara is my God, even a Lingayat or a Shepherd or a Dalit, now finally they have to agree Mailara as their God, because I have given my daughter to Mailara. I allowed Kurbatava to, Mailara to marry her. So through the marriage is the connecting point and binding point, at least in Mailara, which creates a common consciousness among a huge mob. See, this is very important question, because neither a language, nor a political boundary, not even a religion. We are discussing these things, in contemporary India. Neither is that. This is a marriage, kinship, settlement. So these are the things, connecting and creating a public consciousness among the people. But I suggest you, some of you are interested, either you go to Jejuri or Mailara. And if you go to Mailara, it's my pet place. I visited there at least 10 times, and I can make all arrangements to go there and just wonder how 7 lakh people are gathering there. And you don't take your pen, pencil, camera, nothing. You can't do anything with the 7 lakh people there. You can't do anything. Just see, enjoy, and come back. Yeah. And in another place called Huligi, Huligi is one temple like this, Mailara, where people brings their own gods on their head. See, that's very interesting. There's one temple. There's one main temple. There's a Huligamma. Huli is tiger, Huligamma, and people are bringing their own gods on their head on a particular day in the annual ritual. And I could see there are more than 60-70,000 small gods erected all over the temple premises. 3, 4, 5 acre land full of gods. Now, where do you go and do your field work? 70,000 gods temporarily erected in front of main gods. And many people who bring God there never go to main temple. They establish a small hut, they keep their God, they pray, they offer one sheep, they eat, and if you go there, they will also give you something, then take their God, they go back. So there is not one temple, but temple complexes. Temple complexes. So this makes, this makes Vedic ritual entirely different from these folk rituals. In my place, there is a god called Panchalingeshwar God. There is only one God, Panchalingeshwar God. Now, then all others are shops, that's all. But God is only one. You have to go and pray and come back. But if you go to Huligi, a place in northern Karnataka on the bank of river Tungabhadra, during ritual, you see hundreds of, 60-70,000 gods. So this is the complex of gods, multiple gods. That the entire, it's entirely different concept together. That creates a public consciousness among people, because everybody brings God, everybody prays. They are not devoting to one God. They have their own God, but they come together in a particular place. They worship, That is the consciousness they're creating among themselves, keeping their own God and building their relations with others. That's a very interesting phenomenon, and I think India should learn from this.
Sir, thank you. I'd like to ask, why do you think that Komali is absent and missing from the temple architecture? And what all approach, disciplinary approach we require to understand and address this question?
Yeah, see, symbolically, Komali represents shifting cultivation, and which is not representing settlement, right? So if you are settle her with a small temple, which is completely against to her own culture, which she has developed earlier, because he she moves from one place to another, from one place to another place. So you cannot fix a god which was moving earlier, right? See, I will give you another example. Now, these small gods should not have big temples, but these days people are offering. There is a lot of money coming from they are building. But to remember the ancient past, they make a small hole on the top of Garbhagriha. That's very interesting. Why they make, they now the modern Vedic temples have a GoPros on that. It's completely closed, and the Garbhagriha is covered, and the Brahmin priest can go, others cannot grow. So there's a Garbhagriha on the top of there is a Kapota, and then there is a Gopura. It's a beautifully constructed. But in folk deities, even though there is a temple, the top of the Garbhagriha, there is a hole, which shows that earlier, they were in the open space. They were in the open space. You cannot close it. So Komali basically represents a not pastoralist, even landless community, which lived with the Kumeri Bele shifting cultivation. So that is, I say, it carried out till day. Where there is no settlement, there is no permanent build-up, and all such things. And that's one reason. Maybe another reason, it must be very old, because this first, fight with the money and Malla and settlement must have taken as early as 9th and 10th century. It's very old. This Manika, Vanika, marriage with the Malasa, taken place 17th, 18th century. Maybe the long duration also must have, even Komali Sandhu also very short, actually, 2-3 pages. Whereas Malasa marriage is having almost 20-30 pages. So maybe time, maybe one reason, or the concept itself, actually, the pastoralist deity, the landless deity, maybe symbolically represented in the rituals. But we have to look into more carefully.
So we will take one more question.
Yeah.
It's by Santosh Narayan Rao. So the question is there any similarity between Madeshwara and Mailara?
No, sir. No. Madeshwara is entirely different god. So if Prakash ji calls me again, then I will talk about Madeshwara. And because Madeshwara is not a pastoralist deity. No. Mailara is a pastoralist deity. So pastoralism, and see, Madeshwara, that he must be coming from Kalyana. After the fall of Kalyana, he traveled to south. He's not a pastoralist. He must be a artisan. He must be an artisan, because Satyanath knows about this. And there is a lot of information about iron, making of iron. So also this is the artisan group. So Madeshwara group takes you to artisans, and that's a different discipline altogether. Mailara Linga takes you to pastoralism, takes to some other disciplines again. So, I mean, gods are gods, that's different, but basically entirely different constructions. Chisa. Yeah. Ruchi. Yeah.
Yes, sir. I think it's time that we close our session. It was really amazing to hear you, sir, and very mind-boggling to see how, with a case study of Mailara Linga cult, you were able to touch such core questions that trouble the contemporary folklorist at this point. And I really thank you for presenting this and giving us this opportunity to hear you. And I hope that in future we continue to invite you and listen to you. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And I think,
Thank
Yes,
you,
sir.
Prakash ji, for inviting me. It's a great honor to me. Ji, yes, please go ahead.
so this brings us to the final moment. And also, last but not the least, I'd like to thank the convener of this national webinar and our HOD of the department, Professor Patnaik sir, and for giving us this wonderful opportunity to learn and share ideas, and also to grow our knowledge of the discipline, folklore discipline, and about folk life, and to critically engage with from different multidisciplinary perspective. And also, I believe webinars during COVID time, this wonderful initiative is a brilliant example to allow folklore debates to grow and take that center stage as an important research topic in contemporary times. Also, I'd like to extend my thanks to Dr. Venkatramaya sir for extending his constant, seamless technical support. Thank you, sir. For our listeners and audience, this is the closing moment, but I'd request you to please join us tomorrow for the third day of the third part of the national webinar at 10 a.m. Thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
And
sir.
it's a good idea that you
Thank you
arrange
much.
a guest lecture at the end of the seminar, because in the seminar you get only 15 minutes, 20 minutes. But here we get to 1 hour, so that we can share our thoughts. It's an excellent idea to have a guest lecture after the seminar. Actually, those who are interested can join. That's excellent.
With the permission of our moderator, this perfectly justified the theme of the seminar, and this is the last special lecture that is delivered by you.
Okay.
So you have justified the topic.
I have forwarded my PPT, and if you wish, you can share with the participants. If somebody is interested, you are most welcome to.
Sure, it will be there. It will be there in the YouTube also. All our lectures are there right from the first day till today. So all the programs.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Okay, namaskar, sir.
Good night.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good night.